Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the world of agile product delivery today. Specifically, we're going to focus on delivering value frequently. And our guide for this deep dive is the IABA's Guide to Product Ownership Analysis, or as it's commonly called, POA. We're going to be focusing on the deliver often domain from the POA. And to help break all of this down, we have a product development expert with us today.
It's great to be here.
So I think the idea of delivering value frequently sounds great in theory, but how does that actually work in practice?
Well, the POA helps us with that by giving us some techniques. But even more fundamentally than that, it's all about moving away from the old Big Bang launches and instead thinking about how we can create a constant rhythm of value delivery for users.
So we're talking about finding ways to deliver value to users constantly,
Yes, exactly.
which makes sense. But when we talk about delivering value frequently, it begs the question of, well, how do we decide what those valuable pieces are? How do we decide what that rhythm looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. We can't just randomly slice up a product, right?
Right.
That's where the concept of a minimum viable product comes in.
Okay, so MVP.
Yeah, MVP. It's all about pinpointing the core features, the features that will deliver value early on.
So it's not about cutting corners or anything.
Definitely not. It's about being strategic about what you build first.
Got it. The POA uses a case study to illustrate all of this. It's about a food manufacturer called Poultry Plus. I think this example will really bring all of this to life.
It's a great case study.
So in this case study, Poultry Plus had this messy, chaotic system for dealing with new product requests.
Yeah, it was a mess. And their initial plan for their MVP actually seemed pretty reasonable. It seemed like it would address those issues. They basically wanted to create a simple online tool. And with this tool, customers would be able to submit product requests.
So a pretty straightforward solution. But what happened? Did it work out as planned?
Well, not exactly. See, they started interviewing customers. And through these interviews, they found out that customers needed more. Customers needed more than just a form to submit requests.
More guidance.
More guidance, yeah. They needed guidance on the regulations and the manufacturing processes.
Okay.
So they needed to make their MVP more robust. They needed to incorporate other teams into the MVP, teams like sales and R&D.
So even when you think you have a good MVP planned,
Yeah,
it's important to stay flexible.
absolutely. You have to be willing to adapt based on feedback.
And that could be tough because you also want to have a solid plan, right?
Yes, planning is still important.
So how do you strike that balance? How do you create plans that provide guidance, but don't box you in so much that you can't adapt?
That's where the POA framework comes in. It gives us some great techniques for that. It mentions managing the product backlog. It also talks about building minimum viable products. And it even mentions planning releases.
So three main techniques.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with the first one, the product backlog. What is that exactly?
The product backlog is kind of like, well, you can think of it as the central hub for all your product requirements.
Okay, the central
And it's not just a list either. It's a living document that's constantly evolving.
constantly evolving.
Yeah, it's based on new information, new priorities, new feedback.
So it sounds like it's all about having a clear picture of what needs to be done,
Right.
but also understanding the order of things
Yeah.
and why those things are in that order.
You got it.
I see.
And this is actually where building minimum viable products comes back into play.
Oh.
Remember, MVPs are all about delivering value quickly
Mhm.
and then getting feedback and learning from that feedback.
Mm.
So as you work through your product backlog, you might end up building multiple MVPs. You
Mm.
might build multiple MVPs before you get to a minimum marketable release.
So it's not just a one and done thing.
Not necessarily.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, so we have this product backlog. We're building MVPs. But then what about releases? Release planning, where does that fit in?
Release planning in an agile world, it's all about taking those prioritized items from the backlog. It's about grouping them into these releases that have a defined timeline. It's about turning your backlog into a roadmap.
A roadmap that the team can actually follow.
Exactly.
So it sounds like understanding dependencies is crucial here.
It is.
And also understanding what stakeholders need.
Yeah.
Because, we can't overpromise and then underdeliver. We also don't want to build something that nobody actually wants.
For sure.
And the Poultry Plus case study, they actually learned a valuable lesson about this, right?
They did.
What happened?
Well, they realized that they needed to involve a wider range of stakeholders, and they needed to involve them early on.
Early on in the release planning process.
Yeah.
So who are we talking about?
We're talking about the people who are directly involved in implementing the product.
The people on the ground.
Yeah, getting their input on the timeline, on the potential challenges, all of that's super important.
It sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on clarity and agreement. when you're delivering often.
There is.
So is there a formal way to make sure everyone's on the same page? Like when we say something is done,
Yeah.
how do we know it's really done?
Well, that's where the concepts of definition of ready and definition of done come in.
Okay, two definitions.
Two definitions.
Let's break them down. Starting with definition of ready. What does that even mean? Like, what does it mean for something to be ready?
Think of it like a checklist for your product backlog items. We can call them PBIs for short.
Okay, PBI.
So before a PBI can actually move into development, it needs to be clearly defined. It needs to be achievable within the iteration.
Yeah.
And it needs to be testable.
So basically, it needs to be ready to be worked on.
Yeah, ready to be worked on without causing any confusion, without wasting any time.
So it's like a quality control step to make sure everything in the backlog is actually good to go.
You could say that.
Got it. So that's definition of ready. What about definition of done? What makes something officially done?
The definition of done, it clarifies what complete means, and it clarifies it for different work increments.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
So it could involve things like having all the code written, having it tested and reviewed, the documentation needs to be updated, and sometimes you might even need customer sign-off.
So there's no ambiguity about whether or not a task is finished.
Right.
It's either done or it's not.
Exactly.
And that must feel good.
It does.
Just knowing that something is truly done.
It brings a lot of clarity to the process.
I can see how that would be really valuable for a team.
And it all circles back to delivering value frequently. Because by having these clear definitions, we can create a smoother development process.
Which ultimately leads to a better product.
Exactly.
Now, our source material, it actually mentions a couple of specific techniques that we should talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, minimum viable product builds and planning releases.
Okay.
So how do these techniques fit into this bigger picture of delivering value?
Well, they're actually central to that whole idea. Remember, MVPs, they're all about testing assumptions quickly and gathering feedback from users.
It's like putting a stripped-down version of your product out there. Right?
Yeah.
And seeing how people interact with it.
And then using that feedback to figure out what to do next.
And it's all about that build, measure, learn loop.
That's it.
But I gotta say, building an MVP can be tricky.
It can be.
Like, how do you know what to include? How do you know it's minimum without sacrificing the value that you want to offer?
You're right. That's a tough one. I think it comes down to understanding your target audience. And you need to understand their needs. You need to find those core features that address their biggest pain points.
So those core features, they have to be enough to keep users engaged.
Exactly.
And this is where the Poultry Plus case study is so helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because their initial MVP,
It just didn't quite cut it.
it didn't fully meet those needs.
No, it didn't.
And it highlights just how important it is to be adaptable,
Yeah.
to be willing to change course.
For sure.
So it's a constant process of learning and refining.
It is.
So let's say we've built a few MVPs. We've learned from them. We've iterated. What's next?
That's where release planning comes in.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Release planning, in an agile context, it's all about taking those prioritized items from the backlog, and we group them into releases that have a defined timeline. It's about taking that backlog and turning it into a roadmap.
So it sounds like this is where understanding those dependencies and stakeholder needs is so important. You can't overpromise and underdeliver
Right.
or create something that misses the mark entirely.
Exactly.
And Poultry Plus actually had another lesson learned here, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
What happened?
They realized that they needed to involve implementation subject matter experts early on.
Implementation SMEs.
Yeah, getting their input on the timeline, on potential roadblocks. It's crucial for a smooth and successful release.
All this makes perfect sense. But, even with the best plans in place, things don't always go perfectly.
That's true.
So how do we handle those inevitable bumps in the road, those unexpected challenges that always seem to pop up?
That's where the beauty of Agile shines through. Flexibility, adaptability.
So we're not trying to create a plan that's set in stone.
No.
It's more like a framework,
Yeah.
something that provides guidance, but also leaves room for adjustments along the way.
Exactly.
It's almost like navigating a ship through choppy waters. You need to be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
You need to be ready to change course when needed.
Exactly.
And speaking of navigation, the POA framework, it actually offers a few other techniques.
Oh, cool.
Techniques that can help guide us through product development,
Like what?
like customer journey mapping and Kano analysis.
Those are great techniques.
Yeah. So let's start with customer journey mapping. What's that all about?
Have you ever imagined yourself walking through a customer's entire interaction with your product?
Trying to see things from their perspective.
Yeah, that's what a customer journey map is all about.
Okay, so we're literally mapping out their journey.
We are.
We're highlighting all the touch points, the interactions,
Yeah.
even the emotions they experience.
Exactly.
So we're creating a roadmap of their experience.
Right.
From the moment they discover our product to the point where they become loyal users.
That's a great way to put it.
I like that. And by understanding that journey, we can pinpoint those areas where we can improve.
Yes.
We can find those opportunities to create those moments that delight customers.
That's right.
Moments that turn customers into advocates.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
Hmm.
Now, what about Kano analysis? What makes that technique stand out?
Kano analysis, it helps us understand what drives customer satisfaction. It breaks down product features into 3 categories.
3 categories.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
We have threshold attributes, we have performance attributes, and we have excitement attributes.
Okay, 3 buckets. What are threshold attributes?
Think of those as the basic expectations customers have.
The must-haves.
Yeah, the must-haves. The things that would actually cause dissatisfaction if they were missing.
Like the non-negotiables.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
What about performance attributes?
Those are the features that customers actively evaluate. They compare your product to others based on those features. And the better those features are, the more satisfied they'll be.
So these are the features that can really make your product stand out.
Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, we have excitement attributes. Those sound pretty fun.
They are fun. Those are the unexpected delights.
The things that go above and beyond.
Yeah, the things that go above and beyond customer expectations, the things that create that wow factor.
So it's like the cherry on top.
Exactly.
I love that analogy. So by using Kano analysis, we can figure out which features will really delight customers.
That's right.
We can figure out what will give us a competitive edge.
Yeah.
This is amazing. It
Mhm.
seems like the POA framework gives us all these tools for building products that customers will love.
It does.
But before we move on, I want to touch on metrics and KPIs.
Okay.
Because in today's world, data is king, right?
It is.
So how do we measure whether our deliver often efforts are actually working?
That's a great question. And honestly, it's something that's often overlooked. We can't just assume we're delivering value. We need to measure it.
Right.
And that's where metrics and key performance indicators, or KPIs, come into play.
KPIs.
Yeah.
So what kinds of metrics should we be tracking? Give us the insider knowledge.
It depends on your product and your goals.
Yeah.
But there are some common metrics that are really helpful. Things like customer acquisition cost, user engagement, feature usage rates, and churn rates.
Wow, that's a lot of data to keep track of.
It is.
How do we make sense of it all?
You need a framework for analyzing that data. One popular framework is called the HEART framework.
The HEART framework.
Yeah.
What does HEART stand for?
It stands for happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success.
Okay, I love a good acronym.
Me too.
So tell me how the HEART framework helps us with all this data.
Well, it gives us a structured way to assess the customer experience.
Yeah.
And it helps us assess the value we're delivering. So you start by identifying your goals for each of the HEART categories. And then you select signals or metrics that can give you insights into those goals.
So it's like having a dashboard for your product.
Kind of.
You can see how things are performing in key areas.
Exactly.
And by monitoring those metrics, you can spot areas for improvement and track the impact of changes.
And ultimately, you can make sure you're delivering value to your users.
This has been a fantastic deep dive so far. We've covered so much.
They have.
MVPs, release planning, customer journey mapping, even the HEART framework.
It's a lot to take in.
My head is spinning with new ideas.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up today, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Like, what's one thing you wish everyone understood about building successful products?
You know, one thing that really stands out to me is that building a successful product isn't just about those external factors, like understanding your customers. It's also about optimizing those internal processes, the processes that make everything happen.
Ah, so it's about getting your own house in order.
Exactly.
All right.
And there's actually a technique that can help with that. It's called value stream mapping.
Value stream map.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Imagine tracing the path of value creation from the very beginning to the very end.
Okay.
That's what a value stream map does.
It shows you all the steps involved.
Shows you all the steps involved in delivering a product or service, and it highlights any bottlenecks, any areas where things are slowing down.
So it's like taking a magnifying glass to your internal operations
Yes.
and figuring out how to make things more efficient.
Exactly.
I like that. Now, speaking of understanding user needs, I noticed that the POA guide also mentions job stories.
Oh, right. What are those? Job stories, they're all about shifting the focus away from specific user actions. It's not just about what they do, it's about why they do it.
Ah, okay.
So instead of saying, as a user, I want to be able to filter search results, a job story might say, when I'm searching for a product, I want to quickly narrow down my options so I can find what I'm looking for without wasting time.
So it's about understanding their motivation.
Exactly.
What are they really trying to achieve with your product?
Yeah.
By framing things as job stories, we can build features that actually address those needs.
Exactly.
We can build features that solve real problems.
That's right.
We've covered so much today. Minimum viable products, release planning, customer journey mapping, even value stream mapping. It's a lot.
It is.
It feels like we've been given this incredibly powerful toolkit.
You have?
A toolkit for any product team.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose just one key takeaway, one underlying principle that ties everything together, what would it be?
You know, I think the most important thing to remember is that it's all about delivering value.
Delivering value.
Yeah, all of these techniques, all of these processes, they all point back to that.
Okay.
It's about constantly asking yourself, what value does this feature bring to our users? How does it help them achieve their goals? Does it align with our overall product vision?
So we need to keep that value proposition front and center from the very beginning to the very end.
Throughout the entire journey.
And this brings us back to where we started.
It does.
The deliver often philosophy.
Delivering value frequently.
It's about creating that rhythm of value delivery.
A rhythm that keeps users engaged, excited.
A rhythm that keeps them coming back for more.
That's it.
This deep dive has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners. Remember, building a successful product is a journey. It's not a destination. Embrace that agile mindset. Stay flexible, be responsive, always be open to learning and improving.
That's great advice.
And most importantly, build something that truly makes a difference for your users. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Keep those product ideas flowing. And that brings us to one of the big challenges with delivering often.
What's that?
Measuring success.
Ah, yes.
We've talked about all these different techniques and how important they are.
Right.
But how do we actually know if they're working? How do we know if we're actually delivering value?
Well, in today's world, data is king.
It is.
We can't just rely on gut feeling or anecdotal evidence. We need to track our progress. We need to see if our efforts are actually having the desired impact.
So we need metrics.
We do.
We need key performance indicators, those KPIs everyone's always talking about.
Exactly.
So what kind of metrics should we be looking at?
Well, there are a lot of different metrics out there, and which ones are most important will depend on your specific product and goals.
Okay, that makes sense.
But there are some common ones that are usually a good place to start.
Like what?
Well, for example, you might want to track your customer acquisition cost.
Okay.
How much does it cost you to acquire a new customer?
Right.
You might also want to track user engagement.
How often are people using our product?
Exactly.
And how long are they using it for each session?
Yeah, and what features are they using?
Feature usage rates?
Yep.
And then there's churn rate.
Ah, yes, churn rate.
That's always a big one.
It is.
How many customers are we losing?
And why are we losing them?
Okay, so that's a lot of data.
It is.
How do we even begin to make sense of it all?
Well, you need a framework for analyzing all that data.
A framework.
Yeah, something to help you organize your thoughts and draw meaningful conclusions.
So what kind of framework are we talking about?
One popular framework is called the HEART framework.
HEART.
Yeah, it stands for happiness, engagement, adoption, retention, and task success.
Okay, I'm liking this acronym already.
It's a good one.
So tell me, how does the HEART framework actually work?
Basically, it helps you assess the customer experience in a structured way.
Okay.
You identify your goals for each of the HEART categories.
So for example, for happiness, our goal might be to increase customer satisfaction.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And then you select signals or metrics that can give you insights into those goals.
So for happiness, we might track things like customer reviews or net promoter score.
Exactly.
Okay, I see. So it's like having a dashboard for your product, right?
You could think of it that way.
You can see at a glance how you're doing in each of these key areas.
And by monitoring those metrics over time, you can see what's working and what's not.
You can see the impact of the changes you make.
Exactly.
And ultimately, you can make sure you're delivering value to your users.
That's the goal.
This is all starting to come together now.
It is, isn't it?
We've talked about minimum viable products, release planning, the importance of feedback.
Right.
We've even touched on some more advanced techniques like customer journey mapping and Kano analysis.
Those are powerful tools.
They are.
Huh.
And now we're talking about how to measure the success of all those efforts.
It's all connected.
It is.
Yeah.
It's all about creating products that people love and actually use.
And that's what it's all about, right?
It is. So before we wrap things up, is there any final wisdom you want to share with our listeners? What's one thing you wish everyone understood about building successful products?
That's a good question. I think if I had to choose one thing, it would be to never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
Never stop learning.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The world of product development is constantly evolving.
That's true.
New technologies are emerging, new methodologies are being developed, customer expectations are changing.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It is. But if you want to build truly successful products, you need to stay curious. You need to stay adaptable. You need to be willing to embrace new ideas and experiment.
So it's not just about learning the techniques we've talked about today.
No.
It's about cultivating a mindset of continuous learning.
Exactly.
I love that.
And it's not just about reading books and attending conferences either.
Okay.
It's about talking to your users. It's about paying attention to what's happening in the market. It's about being open to new possibilities.
So it's about staying engaged with the world around us.
Yes,
And using that knowledge to inform our product decisions.
exactly.
This has been such an insightful conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you've learned a lot about how to deliver value frequently and how to build products that people truly love. Until next time, keep those product ideas flowing. So we've talked a lot about the external factors of building successful products. Things like understanding your customers, their needs, their journey. But what about those internal factors, the things that happen behind the scenes? What role do those play in delivering value frequently?
Oh, those are crucial too. We can have the best product idea in the world, but if our internal processes are a mess, we're going to have a hard time actually getting that product into the hands of users.
That makes sense.
And that's where a technique like value stream mapping comes in.
Value stream mapping. Okay, tell me more.
It's all about visualizing the flow of value creation.
From start to finish.
Yeah, from the initial idea all the way to the customer receiving the product.
Interesting.
You basically map out all the steps involved.
All the steps in the process.
Yeah.
And what's the benefit of doing that?
Well, it helps you identify any bottlenecks.
Bottlenecks.
Yeah, any areas where things are slowing down. It helps you see where the waste is in your process.
So it's about making things more efficient,
Exactly.
streamlining the process.
And when your processes are more efficient, you can deliver value to your users more quickly.
This is making me think about all the inefficiencies in my own life now.
Take a great tool for that too.
I bet. So speaking of understanding user needs, the POA guide also mentions something called job stories.
Oh yeah, job stories are great.
What are they about?
Well, they're kind of like user stories, but they focus on the underlying motivation behind the user's actions.
So it's not just about what they're doing, it's about why they're doing it.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Instead of saying, as a user, I want to be able to filter search results, a job story might say something like, when I'm searching for a product, I want to be able to quickly narrow down my options so I can find what I'm looking for without wasting time.
So we're getting to the heart of their needs. We're understanding what they're really trying to achieve.
Yep,
That's powerful.
it is.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've talked about so many different techniques.
From MVPs to release planning to customer journey mapping, even value stream mapping and job stories.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But if there were just one key takeaway, one underlying principle that ties everything together, what would it be?
For me, it all comes back to delivering value.
Delivering value.
Yeah, that's the core of it all. All these techniques, all these processes, they're all in service of that one goal.
So it's not just about following a set of steps.
No,
It's about keeping that value proposition front and center
absolutely.
at every stage of the process.
From the initial idea to the final product and beyond.
This has been such an enlightening conversation.
It has been fun.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of agile product delivery. We hope you've gained some valuable insights into how to deliver value frequently and how to build products that people truly love. Until next time, keep those product ideas flowing